Okay, so let me get my screencast keys turned on for the moment. I just spent about an hour recording this before realizing that my microphone was not turned on, so oh joy. Bonus thing is you don't get to hear me rambling and mumbling so much because I wrote down my notes on what I was doing. So this is a new Blender file. My ultimate goal is to make a huge ocean. And that way, if you have like a faraway camera shot and you have a ship or something and you want to see water trail effects, you can combine that with the dynamic paint. Or if you have a really, really close up shot, like let's say that this is your ship hull and you want to see the fluid physics, you could take the internal Blender fluid physics or flip fluid physics and combine it with that with a bunch, and I do mean a bunch of modifiers. So it's essentially how to combine displacement or dynamic paint or flip fluids with a ridiculously huge ocean. So that being said, as always, select everything, delete the default cube. It always gets deleted. I'm going to add in a plane. I'm going to call this Ocean 1. Yeah, just to kind of keep things organized. Add in an ocean modifier to it. Now I can zoom out. Because I'm going to be making a really large ocean, I'm going to go ahead into the view panel and just set this to 20,000. Okay, now make all of this up. Okay. I'm going to set my viewport resolution to 15, render resolution to 30. Enter. Why did you do that? All right. Set my time on frame 1 to 0. Hover over the marker here. Just press I to insert a keyframe. Come all the way over to frame 250. Change this to 10.5, I think. 10.5, 10.4. And play. Spacebar, Alt-A. For me, it's Alt-A because I'm using the old Blender short keys. Or you can just click the button down here to play. But you see how it's starting and stopping? We don't want that at all. We want it to be as like fluid as possible. So I'm just going to come over to the graph editor. Go to key, handle type, vector. And that'll clear that problem up. I'm just going to leave this here for now. And come back to my ocean modifier settings. And I'm going to play around with it. You don't have to copy exactly what I'm doing in these settings, by the way. If you want big waves like this, then by all means, set your waves how you want them. I'm going for a relatively smooth looking ocean and not something, you know, that looks like it's out of Dante's Inferno. So I'm just going to set that back to 1 for now and go about putting this in how they need to be. So turn on my generate normals, generate foam. I'm going to add the data layer and just call it foam. Okay. I'm going to increase the spatial size to 100, just so that it's 100 meters across. That'll make tiling everything with the modifiers later on much, much easier. Rather than doing it in increments of 50, I can just do it in increments of 100. Depth, I'm just going to set it to 5. Choppiness, again, I'm going for a relatively smooth ocean, so I'm just going to 0.5. Wind velocity, don't really want to mess with that right now because I'm going to mess with that, controlling it with the actual animated image sequence that I'm getting ready to bake out. All right, And now what you want to do is save the file. So I'm just going to go ahead and save. Okay. And then I'm just going to come down here in the bake settings and / ocean tutorial bake. Enter. Instead of having to click on this and, create a new folder, if you didn't know, if you just put 2 slashes here, and this is rendering caches, anything. If you just put 2 slashes, Blender will automatically create a new folder for you. So all you need to do is just put in the name of the folder that you want it to be, and it'll put it there for you. So frame 250, cache is 1 to 250. Good. And I'm going to hit bake. All right. Just got finished baking. So now I can come over here to my shader editor because I'm going to start setting the material up. So I'm going to come over to preview view, but turn on the world settings. And it's going to get really dark. But over here in my shader view, I'm going to switch over to world, get rid of the active tool thing within because I don't really need to see it. Environment texture. There we go. I apologize. So now let's re-add in the HDRI. What in the world? Blender? I think Blender is drunk right now. Generated vector. There we go. Now I can see. So, yeah, that's pretty nice. That way it allows me to see the reflections and stuff going on. So, now that I've got the world set up, go over to Object, click on New. I'm just going to call this Ocean. Enter. And now I can start doing the material. So I'm going to change this base color to black. And for water, glass, anything, it's usually index of refraction is 1.333. Change the roughness all the way to 0. And there's your basic water setup. Nice. But that's not all. So I'm going to add in a second principled shader. Playing that right there. I'm going to have to mix these. So just put in a mix shader. Put this one on the bottom. Okay. And for the factor, I'm going to use the foam images. So add in an image texture. And wherever you saved your bake at, for me it's in this folder, and it is going to take forever to scroll down and find the foam. So you want to add in all of your foam. Come on. There's a lot of images to scroll through. Okay. Whew. Enter. Nice. So that made it a bit bigger. I'm going to plug this into the factor. Turn on auto refresh. So that way, if you're playing it through, this is going to be extremely laggy, but the images update with you scrolling through the timeline. There we go. And I don't want as much foam, so I'm just gonna add in a color ramp just to play around with this. So changes the B spline. Now, the more you bring up the black, the less foam you have. The more you bring down the white, the more intense the foam is. So it's about finding that sweet spot. And it's going to be different depending on your wants and needs in the scene. If you want to have really intense foam, then bring the white down. If you don't want to have as much foam like that, that's a ridiculous amount of foam, then just bring the black up. So for right now, I'm just going to say right there is good for me. That makes me happy. I'm going to mess with it again in a minute. because I'm never happy with the foam. So we're going to do the same thing, images. And now I'm going to add in the normal that we baked out, not the displacement, which will look like a red, black, blue, green, red, purple image. But this will be like an almost completely green image with slightly light green little striations all throughout it. So if I plug it in here, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. Wait for Blender to load. Yeah. So ignoring the white from the foam, this is essentially the image that you're wanting to look for, is that bright neon green type image. So let me get rid of that. Bring that right there. As always, turn on auto refresh. But I don't want it to be green. I want it to be black and white. So I'm going to add in a black and white. And then, because Blender is a special program, I'm going to do an invert node. And now, one more bump. Have to convert the black and white data into a bump map. Because again, Blender special. So now we can do this. And the invert plugs into the height of the bump, not the normal. Blender's weird that way. So normal to normal on both of these. And now we zoom in, we got bumps all over the place. Maybe you want to increase the bumps. Maybe you don't want as many bumps. If so, you play around with the settings. I am going to use 0.5 just for the sake of simplicity. Okay. Join. There we go. Add in a plane. Come over here. Control R. Delete the outsides. Select this. Extrude Y 5000. There we go. So now, if I zoom out, select this big thing. Actually, it's really hard to see. So just edit mode, select everything with A, scale, X 50. Now I should be able to see when I zoom out. Yeah. There. And my screencast keys stopped working. There we go. So this is how big the ocean is going to be. This is 5 kilometers. Add in a circle. Tab into edit mode. Make sure you have your edge links turned on. Extrude. Scale with S. I'm just going to hold the shift key down because this is not going to be extruded very much. I'm going to go with 0.09. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm going to get as close to it as possible. There. Close enough. Now, shift R. And that's going to just repeat our previous action. And you're probably going to have to hit this close to 100 times. Because this huge thing that I just made up here is 5 kilometers. And I'm going to continue to hit the redo key over and over and over again until the patch of ocean has covered that. Almost there. Look at that, right on it. Boom. So now I can delete that little measurement tool that I used. And now this is our ocean, or at least it will be. So I'm going to just say this will be the ocean proxy. All right. The idea behind this is it's really, really big. So if I come up here, from side to side is 10 kilometers. I don't know any reason whatsoever that you would ever need an ocean bigger than this one. I will say though, I have seen some people on YouTube, like if I just add in a camera, and clear the rotation and rotate X 90. So if I come right here, the camera is facing, move it up a little bit. The camera is moving, or not moving, but just facing one direction at a 90-degree angle. So I have seen some people take this where they'll select this line and then select this line. Nope, wrong line. There we go. And then get out of camera view. So everything of these orange sections right here. Let me go ahead and turn the edge links off because it's making it a little cluttered. I've seen people take this and then shift select or control I to invert select, and then they'll delete everything. And then that gives them a big patch of ocean. But the problem with that is, what happens if you want to move the camera? Right? So I am going to undo that just so that I retain this huge swath of ocean. If at any point in the future in this tutorial that you find that your computer is screaming, smoking, sending out SOS signals, you're going to want to come back to this step and just delete everything that is not in your camera view, because it might try to kill your computer. But that being said, I want to be able to move the camera around, so I'm going to leave it there. Onwards. So I'm going to select the original ocean modifier that we were playing with, move this, and add a displacement modifier, or a displace. Set the mid-level to 0. There we go. Excuse me. And while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and subdivide it as well. Move the subdivision all the way up, and I don't need to mess with that. That's enough. Otherwise, it'll have so much lag, it's not even funny. Okay. Direction. I'm going to have to add a new one. Change this to object, and this will be an empty that I have not added in yet. So add in an empty, and I'm almost caught up to where I was when I had to stop and restart the recording. Scale the empty by 50, because that's going to make it the same size as the ocean plane itself. The ocean modifier plane. So now I can click back on the ocean modifier plane and set this to empty. Nice. Direction. I can't remember if I messed with that or not, but I do know. Shade smooth. Always. Click that little 2-bar icon. It's going to take you here. And now finally, we get to add in the displacement that we baked out way back. So add in all of those frames as an image sequence. Open. And you see how there's like uber amounts of color in here. The only one the only one that we really care about is green. So that is the height, the Z, if you will. So come down to colors, turn red and blue all the way down. There we go. Now we just got green. Make sure everything else is set up. Auto refresh. Always auto refresh. Glad I saw that. And now I can hide that. Turn the render off because I'm not actually going to be rendering that. And turn on our huge ocean. And come over to here. God, the ocean is so large. All right, I think that was the direction that I had it, just so that I could see the reflections and stuff. Come up here, click this, ocean. And it might take Blender a second or two to load it, because I don't see any warping going on. I don't see any warping of the surface. So again, subdivision. I'm going to leave it there just for the sake of not wanting to kill my computer during a recording. Displace, same thing. Turn the mid-level to 0. Add a new one. Select the texture. Yep, there we go. So this is the texture that we already have showed up, but we need to select that and empty. And now we have a little bit of bumpy. Not much, but a little bit. You can play around with it with the strength. That would be like mountainous type Inception waves. Or not Inception, Interstellar. But anyway, if I play this, it should work. Yeah. My computer is currently crying. But shade smooth. There you go. So I've finally caught back up to where I was when I realized my microphone was turned off. So now, let me just save this because everything has gone well so far. I'm about to have to call the tutorial quits in a few minutes because my eye is starting to mess up. I can't wait for that shot. Anyway, come back to the shader editor. Press N to get rid of that. Now, select the foam image texture, Control T. I'm going to set this to object. And again, the empty. And Blender is going to take forever to load because it's Blender. And on image sequences, you don't ever have to worry about Z because Z again is the height. So their image textures are always X and Y. So I'm just going to change the scale to 0.5 and the location 0.5. By the way, if you ever are wondering like and wanting, if you find it annoying to click on this and type in 0.5, tab 0.5, tab 0.5, you can just click on one of them, hold down the button, and then drag it down, and then it'll allow you to change all of them at once. I just learned that. I've been using Blender for like 12 years. All right. So now, moment of truth. If I move this, yeah, you see, let me zoom out way out. We'll take care of the repetitive pattern in a minute. But you can see the plane or the circle hasn't moved. But if we select the empty, which is that little orange dot, and move the empty around, the texture itself moves, but the plane does not. So no matter what, you're always going to have, kilometers and kilometers of ocean. But if you move in and just select the empty allows you to animate the ocean and move it. So you can add some movement in with the empty. You could also be moving the camera, and that'll make it move even faster. Ah, here we are. Whew. Took me forever to find those things. All right. So let me open up my image editor. All right. So essentially, you're going to have to use Photoshop or GIMP to make an image similar to this. I have it scaled at 2048 by 2048. And if you don't know how to make one, in GIMP, I don't have Photoshop, so I didn't make one with Photoshop. I basically just made a new image, added a filter, cloud, inverted the colors, and then upped the contrast and down to the brightness. And then I saved that as oceannoise.png. And then I did a invert colors on it. Same image, and this is ocean noise invert. That's it. So now that I have those loaded in, now I can go back to shader editor, duplicate this empty, Shift D to duplicate, enter, and I'm going to call this ocean deform empty. All right. And just for prosperity, I'm going to move it out that way, just so that I can differentiate between the two empties and not have them occupying the same space. And I'm going to duplicate it one more time. Duplicate. And let's move it on the y-axis right there. And I'm just going to call that one ocean mix empty. All right, so now I've got 3 empties in the scene. I've got the one that's controlling the ocean overall, and then these 2 that I'm about to mess with. Now, click on the big ocean. All of these nodes, it's about to become way more complicated. And I'm going to box select all of this. Control G, add them into a group. Tab out, press the N key. And now I can just name the group ocean. Drag this back over here so it's closer to the material output. Now I want to duplicate that. So I'm going to GY after I shift D on it to move it straight down. I'm just going to make this bigger so I can read what they are. And I'm just going to call this ocean material 2. I want this one to be independent, so that way if I make any changes to this one, it doesn't get copied over into this one. Tab into it. All right, and then ocean deform empty. And I can tab out of this. Mix shader. Boom, boom. And mix those 2 together. I want the deform empty, the first duplicate that we made. And I'm going to rotate it on the z-axis by, let's say 35. Yeah. So this is really, really funky. But if you've ever looked at water whatsoever, it doesn't just singularly move like this. So now you can see moving the original empty, parts of it stay still, and then parts of it move. Water is really, really complicated to try and simulate. Anyway, clicking back on this tab, I'm going to add in an image texture, and I'm going to select the ocean noise and make that as a factor for the mix. And that's going to hopefully try and break up so much of the repetitiveness of the ocean itself. I'm going to Control T to add in mapping and texture coordinates automatically with the Node Wrangler add-on. Change this from UV to object. And then this will be the ocean mix empty. I'm going to play around with this. I might have to change back to sRGB. And now back to the modifiers panel. Minimize that. Vertex weight edit. It's a new one that I've never messed around with before. So I want to move it above the displace modifier. And the default weight 0.95. And I'm going to come over here to the little green triangle and add 2 vertex groups. And just for easiness, this will be group 1. And this will be group 2. Now back to the modifier. I'm going to turn on group add, change the default weight to 0.5. I'm going to add a texture mask. Add in a new texture. Click these two little bars. And I should be able to use the ocean noise as the texture mask. All right, back to the modifier. Change the texture coordinate of the mask to object and use the mix, ocean mix empty. Change this to sharp. And in the displace modifier, I'm going to change the vertex group to group 1. And now I'm going to duplicate this. Boop. And change this to group 2. I'm going to add in a new mask texture and use that inverted. Leave everything else the same. Now I'm going to duplicate this and change group 2. And change the object to ocean deform empty. And now back right here, same thing, change this to 0.5 and then scale 0.5. And let me just play around with this a little more. Color ramp, boom. Wait for Blender to load. Might take it a little while because there's so many modifiers on this plane. All right. I want to play around with the black value.
5 minutes later.
So now we're breaking up the foam.
2 hours later.
So essentially the black layer is messing with how much foam is showing up on the secondary texture, which is like right here. If I mess with this, the more I move the black up, let me move this all the way back up. If I move the black up, that completely eliminates the second foam layer. And if I move the white down, that affects how much foam is on the top layer. So I just want to play around with this a second.
1 eternity later.
Helps break up that repeatedness a little bit. Like if you zoom out, you're obviously going to see repetitiveness, but you're never really going to zoom that far out on an animation. All right. Let me make sure this is on cyclic. I'm going to play with this. It's on 24 frames a second, so I'm just going to do half second. And that should be it. Whew. So my eye is really starting to mess up from the brightness of this screen. So I'm going to go ahead and call this a day. I will continue on with the next section of combining the displacement, I keep saying displacement, not displacement, dynamic paint, and then flip fluids at a later date. But for right now, this will do. So thank you for watching. I will see you later. Like, comment, subscribe, and toodles.